Have you ever felt the sting of being judged before anyone even knew you? Imagine sitting in a seat you rightfully earned, only to be told you don't belong because of the color of your skin, your age, or assumptions about your family. That's exactly what 17-year-old Jordan Price and his 15-year-old sister Aaliyah faced on a transatlantic flight. They were comfortably settled in the airline's VIP pods when an entitled passenger demanded their seats. The flight crew backed her, threatening removal and even arrest. In that moment, Jordan and Aaliyah were faced with a choice: submit to humiliation and leave, or stand their ground against authority that seemed insurmountable. Imagine being them alone, teenagers, confronted with the unimaginable. Your world suddenly narrowed to a decision that could change everything. Now picture having a secret advantage, a father whose influence could shift the balance of power. But even that choice carried weight, responsibility, and consequences far beyond their control. As you watch this story unfold, consider what you would do in their shoes. Would you stay calm under pressure, protect those you love, and fight for what's right, or would fear make the decision for you? Join us on this journey of courage, justice, and resilience. Hit like, share with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to our channel as we reveal the full story. Move, or I'll have you and your sister dragged off this aircraft. The words cut through the low hum of the cabin like a blade. They came from Captain Douglas Kane himself, standing tall at the front of the VIP cabin of Sterling Airways Flight 472. His uniform was pressed to perfection, silver wings catching the overhead light. But his voice carried no warmth, only command. Seated in Pod 1A, 17-year-old Jordan Price felt his stomach tighten, his hands resting on the armrest of the luxurious lie-flat seat, curled into fists beneath the soft leather. Next to him, in Pod 1B, his 15-year-old sister Aaliyah froze mid-sentence, her phone trembling in her hand. She had been recording a playful clip for her followers only moments earlier. Now, her wide eyes locked on the captain's face, fear breaking through her usual boldness. The cabin itself seemed to hold its breath. Glasses clinked faintly in the galley. The distant whir of the engines was suddenly louder than the murmur of first-class passengers who had stopped mid-conversation. The confrontation didn't belong in this world of champagne flutes and polished wood paneling, yet here it was ugly, raw, undeniable. Jordan swallowed hard. He had read about moments like this, stories passed around in hushed voices among his friends, but he never thought he'd live it in such an obvious, humiliating way. The irony was sharp. He and his sister were not causing a disturbance. They weren't unruly. They were simply sitting in the seats their father had purchased months earlier. Seats 1A and 1B. Seats that had suddenly become a battlefield. Captain Kane's voice pressed on, low enough to sound private, but sharp enough that the nearest passengers could hear. This is a federal offense. Refusing to follow crew instructions has consequences. You've got 60 seconds to decide. 60 seconds. Jordan felt the clock ticking in his chest, each beat of his heart heavy, louder than the last. He wanted to stand tall, to match the captain's steel stare, but his throat burned. He knew what this moment meant. For kids like him and Aaliyah, moments of defiance didn't end neatly. They could spiral into humiliation, into police reports, into headlines no family wanted to read. He turned to look at Aaliyah. Her phone was angled low, recording, her knuckles white around it. She mouthed two words, "Don't move." Her eyes glistened with both fear and fire. Jordan had seen that look before, on long nights when she stayed up editing videos, on afternoons when she defended friends against bullies. She had courage to spare, but right now, courage wasn't enough. The air was suffocating. The silence stretched thin. The other passengers shifted in their seats, some avoiding eye contact, others openly staring as though watching a play unfold on stage. Jordan could almost hear their unspoken thoughts. Why don't they just move? Why make it harder for everyone else? That's how the crew wanted it, social pressure as the sharpest weapon. But Jordan couldn't move. Not this time. His father had always told him, "Son, there will be days when people look at you and decide you don't belong, no matter the proof in your hand. Those are the moments when you decide who you are." He felt that weight now, his father's words, the sting of injustice, his sister's eyes begging him not to give in. Captain Kane leaned closer, voice rising. "You heard me? Off these seats, or off this plane." Jordan drew in a slow breath. His pulse steadied. Beneath the panic, a thread of clarity cut through. This wasn't just about 2 seats. It was about dignity, about showing his sister that some things were worth standing firm for. He exhaled, his voice low but unwavering. "We're not moving." The words landed like a stone dropped in water, ripples spreading across the cabin. A gasp from somewhere behind him, a muttered curse from another seat. The captain's face hardened, and the seconds ticked on. Aaliyah's phone captured it all, the trembling in her breath, the steel in her brother's tone, the growing tension that wrapped the VIP cabin like a storm cloud. Jordan didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty: the line had been drawn, and he wasn't stepping back. Hours earlier, before the storm of voices and threats, the day had carried a different weight. 17-year-old Jordan Price and his 15-year-old sister, Aaliyah, walked side by side through the glass halls of Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The terminal bustled with the rhythm of travelers pulling rolling suitcases, coffee cups in hand, voices layered in a constant murmur. For most kids, traveling alone might have been intimidating. For the Price siblings, it was a rite of passage. Their father, Malcolm Price, had arranged it that way. He believed in giving his children space to prove themselves, to step out into the world without him constantly shielding them. He had worked hard to reach his position as CEO of Horizon Global Logistics, and he never forgot how much the world could underestimate someone who looked like him. His greatest wish was to prepare his children not just with comfort, but with resilience. Jordan, already nearly 6 feet tall, with a lean, athletic build, carried himself with quiet confidence. He wore simple jeans and a navy hoodie, nothing flashy, nothing meant to draw attention. A thick paperback rested in his backpack, an advanced physics book he had been devouring in late-night stretches. He was the thinker, the one who liked to analyze every angle before making a move. Aaliyah was different. She was all light and energy, with a love for storytelling that spilled across her social media platforms. Her curls framed a face that could shift from laughter to seriousness in a heartbeat. In her backpack, instead of textbooks, was a ring light and a phone charger. She documented life, turning even small moments into stories her friends loved to follow. Together, they balanced one another, he, the anchor, she, the spark. That morning, their father had hugged them each in the driveway before the chauffeur took them to the airport. "Remember," Malcolm had said, his deep voice soft with affection, "you've earned everything about this trip. Walk with your heads high." Aaliyah had rolled her eyes playfully. "Dad, it's just a plane ride." But Jordan had caught the flicker in their father's gaze, the weight behind the words. Malcolm wasn't just talking about a trip to Los Angeles. He was talking about the world they were growing up in, the eyes that would follow, the judgments that would come. At the airport, check-in had been smooth. Their tickets were for the airline's most exclusive cabin, the VIP pods, seats 1A and 1B. It was the kind of upgrade their father rarely indulged in. But this trip was different. It was their first time flying alone across the country. He wanted them to feel safe, comfortable, celebrated even. Jordan had studied the boarding passes with quiet pride before slipping them into his phone wallet. For him, the detail mattered. Having those tickets in hand meant legitimacy. They were not imposters. As they boarded the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, the cabin air smelled faintly of citrus and new leather. The space was serene, the pods gleaming with polished wood grain, cream-colored seats, and ambient lighting. Flight attendants smiled as they passed, one offering champagne, which they declined, another bringing chilled orange juice in crystal glasses. Aaliyah was wide-eyed. She pulled out her phone and whispered into the camera, "This is insane. Look at this legroom." She panned across the cabin, capturing the stretch of space in front of them, the personal minibar stocked with sparkling water and gourmet snacks. "Dad really went all out this time," she said, grinning at Jordan, who shook his head but smiled despite himself. He slid into 1A, pulling out his physics book, and set his noise-canceling headphones around his neck. "Don't get too distracted making videos," he teased. "Don't get too distracted reading that brick." She shot back. They laughed quietly, the way siblings do when they know they're on the edge of an adventure. For a while, everything was perfect. The cabin filled slowly with passengers, each settling into their spaces. Glasses clinked faintly as pre-flight drinks were served. The soft thrum of engines outside promised a smooth journey ahead. Jordan leaned back, eyes scanning formulas in his book, while Aaliyah angled her phone to capture the last rays of Georgia sunlight through the oval window. It felt like a moment carved out of ordinary life, safe, even celebratory, a father's gift of reassurance. But beneath Jordan's calm exterior, thoughts shifted. He felt the responsibility pressing on him more than ever. He wasn't just a passenger. He was the protector. Their father had trusted him to lead the way, to watch out for his younger sister. He thought of Malcolm's voice that morning, serious beneath the affection, "Walk with your heads high." Jordan wondered how often his father had swallowed down insults in boardrooms, how many times he had to choose between fighting back and moving on. He wondered what his father might do if someone challenged them now, here in this floating palace of polished wood and glass. Aaliyah, oblivious to her brother's internal storm, leaned over and whispered, "Do you think anyone will notice it's just us? No parents?" Jordan glanced at her, shrugged lightly. "If they do, so what? We're fine." But his stomach tightened with the unspoken thought, not everyone sees us as fine. Not everyone will let us belong without a fight. The hum of the cabin seemed to echo that truth. As the last passengers began to board, Jordan closed his book and slipped it back into the seat pocket. He adjusted his headphones but left them off. He wanted to be alert. Something in him, a quiet instinct, told him that peace could be fragile. Aaliyah noticed the change in his posture. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said, forcing a small smile. "Just thinking." She nodded, unconcerned, and returned to editing her video. But Jordan's gaze stayed forward, steady, waiting. Minutes later, the aisle filled again, and into the calm cabin stepped Margaret Whitfield and her son Brandon. Their arrival would shatter the fragile peace. But in that quiet moment, before everything turned, Jordan allowed himself one more deep breath, anchoring himself in the comfort of his seat, in the knowledge that they belonged here. That belonging, he would soon learn, was about to be challenged in ways neither he nor his sister could imagine. The quiet rhythm of the cabin shifted the moment Margaret Whitfield appeared. She was dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit, her blonde hair sculpted into a helmet of perfection, her pearls resting heavily against her collarbone. At her side shuffled her son Brandon, tall and wiry, the kind of teenager who looked at the world through narrowed eyes as though everything in it existed solely for his boredom. He held his phone in both hands, thumbs tapping quickly across the glass screen, paying no attention to anyone around him. Margaret, however, noticed everything. Her gaze swept the cabin like a queen surveying her court, pausing at the gleaming pods in the front row, seats 1A and 1B. Pausing on Jordan and Aaliyah. "Excuse me," she said, her voice pitched with false politeness but sharpened with entitlement. She raised her hand, a manicured finger pointing directly at the two teenagers. "There seems to be a mistake. These are our seats." The nearest flight attendant, Linda Hayes, turned at once. Her professional smile twitched as though unsure of which side to favor. "Yes, ma'am." "What seems to be the problem?" Margaret tilted her head, lips pressed into a thin line of disbelief. "My son and I are ticketed for 1A and 1B. Yet here they are, occupied." She didn't address Jordan or Aaliyah directly, not even a glance as though acknowledging them would grant them legitimacy. Her words were aimed only at the authority in uniform, the assumption clear authority would side with her. Jordan shifted in his seat, calm but alert. He pulled his phone from his hoodie pocket, already anticipating what was coming. "Our boarding passes," he said evenly, extending the screen toward Linda. "Jordan Price, 1A. Aaliyah Price, 1B. They were purchased months ago." Aaliyah, trying to steady her voice, nodded beside him. "Our dad booked them for us." Linda leaned closer, glancing briefly at the glowing screen, but offering no acknowledgement. Her eyes flickered toward Margaret and softened. "I see," she murmured. "There may have been a system error. Let me check Mrs. Whitfield's passes." Margaret produced them with a flourish, sliding the printed tickets into Linda's hand as though she were offering evidence of a crime. "See for yourself," she said, her tone triumphant. Linda studied the paper far longer than she had looked at Jordan's screen, her brow furrowed. But it wasn't confusion, it was calculation. Her smile stiffened, and when she turned back to the siblings, her voice dropped into a conspiratorial whisper. "Sometimes upgrades process incorrectly," she said, lowering her head as though doing them a favor. "We can reseat you in row 5, still first class, still very comfortable. You'll hardly notice a difference." Aaliyah's jaw dropped. "Hardly notice? Those aren't pods. We paid for these seats." The mention of their father seemed to land differently on Linda's ears. She assumed the Price children had a modest parent who had splurged once, a man who'd never be able to challenge the airline. Her smile thinned into resolve. "Mrs. Whitfield is one of our Platinum Elite members," Linda said quickly, improvising. "We have to prioritize our most loyal travelers." Jordan felt the heat rise in his chest. He understood exactly what was happening. Authority wasn't following data. It was following optics, a wealthy-looking white woman against two black teenagers traveling alone. He steadied his breathing, keeping his voice calm. "With respect, these are our confirmed tickets. We aren't moving." The tension spread. The clink of glasses stopped. A couple across the aisle turned their heads. Behind them, someone shifted uncomfortably in their seat. The drama was no longer private. It was theater. Margaret folded her arms, smiling faintly, satisfied to let the airline staff fight her battle for her. Brandon muttered without looking up from his phone. "Figures." Linda's face flushed. She had expected compliance, not resistance. Her authority, usually absolute in these situations, had been challenged. She straightened her shoulders and hissed under her breath. "Young man, I am not asking you, I am telling you." Aaliyah pressed record on her phone, sliding it discreetly to the side of her seat. Her pulse hammered, but she remembered her father's words about documenting when power turned abusive. She didn't want to believe it was happening, but the dread coiled in her chest told her otherwise. Jordan knew exactly what she was doing. He gave her the slightest nod. Linda turned and gestured to a tall man approaching from the galley. "Thomas," she called, her voice louder, carrying across the cabin. "We have a situation." The purser, Thomas Reed, strode forward with the weariness of someone accustomed to disputes but uninterested in truth. He didn't bother looking at the boarding passes Jordan still held. He didn't question. He simply listened to Linda's summary. "These two are refusing to vacate Mrs. Whitfield's seats. They're being difficult." The words branded them in an instant. Not passengers, not customers. Difficult. Thomas leaned down, his voice condescending. "Folks, let's not make a scene. Row 5 is identical, I assure you. Gather your things so we can close the cabin doors. They're not identical." Aaliyah cut in, her voice sharp but steady. "Those are regular lie flats. These are pods. They are not what we booked. And that's not the point," Jordan added, firmer now. "The error isn't ours to fix. If there's an issue, it's between Sterling Airways and the Whitfields." Margaret seized her moment, laying a hand theatrically on her hip. "I have a bad back," she declared. "These seats are a medical necessity." The lie hung in the air, bold and unchallenged. Thomas nodded gravely, buying the performance. The other passengers shifted again, sympathy tilting toward the older woman. Jordan felt the trap closing. They were being reframed not rightful passengers, but selfish kids unwilling to yield to a suffering elder. The eyes on them hardened. "I'm sorry to hear that," Jordan said, politeness his shield. "But our tickets are valid. Maybe the airline can find another solution." Thomas's expression soured. "We're not rebooking a platinum member because of your refusal to cooperate. This is your last chance to move nicely." Jordan's voice dropped, quiet but resolute. "No." The word landed with finality, an anchor against the tide. Silence rippled outward, heavy and undeniable. Aaliyah's phone caught the moment, her hand trembling but steadying as she focused the lens on Thomas's face. She could feel the storm building, the air thick with unspoken judgment. Somewhere deep in Jordan's chest, fear mixed with resolve. He knew they had stepped onto a road with no easy way back. The aisle lights flickered once as final boarding announcements echoed faintly through the cabin. Outside, ground crew signaled, luggage carts rattled, the hum of jet engines swelled. But inside the VIP pod section of Sterling Airways, Flight 472 time seemed to stretch. All eyes had turned toward the standoff in row 1. Jordan Price sat still in 1A, spine rigid, jaw set. Aaliyah shifted beside him, her phone low against her thigh, recording every word, every glance, every shift of authority that pressed down on them. Purser Thomas Reed loomed over them with the quiet confidence of someone used to winning arguments by sheer force of tone. "This is your last warning," he said, his voice sharp but even, like a teacher scolding children. "Either move to row 5 or you'll be removed before takeoff." Removed. The word carried the weight of humiliation, of headlines Jordan had read before passengers dragged down aisles, their faces plastered across the internet. He pictured his father's disappointment not in him, but in a world that still made these moments inevitable. Jordan steadied his breathing. "Our tickets are valid. We're not moving." His voice was firm, calm, but his hands trembled slightly where they rested on the armrest. A murmur ran through the cabin. Some passengers whispered to one another, others stared openly, their expressions divided between sympathy and irritation. A businessman across the aisle glanced at his watch, annoyed at the delay. A young woman 2 rows back bit her lip, uncertainty written across her face. Margaret Whitfield took her chance to escalate. She pressed a hand to her lower back and winced dramatically. "This is unacceptable. I told you, my back can't handle those inferior seats. I need these. Her son Brandon smirked, eyes still fixed on his phone. He muttered just loud enough to carry unbelievable. They always play victim. Aaliyah's grip tightened around her phone. Heat flooded her face, shame colliding with rage. She wanted to shout, to tell him exactly how wrong he was, but Jordan shot her a warning glance. Not now. Not like this. Linda Hayes reappeared at Thomas's side, her voice carrying a note of exasperation. "We're holding up the flight. Captain Kane needs to know what's happening." Jordan felt the air change. He had read about escalation protocols. When the captain got involved, things rarely went well for passengers accused of being uncooperative. Sure enough, moments later, Captain Douglas Kane appeared from the cockpit, his uniform immaculate, his posture radiating authority. He scanned the scene, eyes narrowing on Jordan and Aaliyah. "What's the problem?" His tone suggested he had already decided who the problem was. Thomas gestured toward them. "They're refusing to give up the seats. Mrs. Whitfield has a medical condition. We've offered alternatives. They won't cooperate." The captain's gaze hardened. "Is that true?" he demanded. Jordan opened his mouth, choosing his words carefully. "Our father purchased these seats months ago. We're not refusing to cooperate. We're refusing to be downgraded for someone else's convenience." Captain Kane leaned closer, his voice low but edged with steel. "Son, this is not up for debate. If I say you move, you move. Otherwise, I'll have airport security waiting at the gate. And believe me, you do not want that record following you." Aaliyah's breath caught. She whispered, almost too softly, "Jordan." Jordan's chest tightened, but he kept his voice even. "We've done nothing wrong." The silence that followed was suffocating. The captain's eyes bored into him, testing, pushing, daring him to break. The cabin seemed to shrink around them, the hum of engines now a roar in Jordan's ears. Aaliyah raised her phone slightly, the camera now catching both her brother's profile and the captain's looming figure. Her hands trembled, but her resolve crystallized. If no one else believed them, at least the truth would live in her recording. Captain Kane's patience snapped. His voice rose, no longer controlled. "This is a federal offense. You are interfering with the safe operation of this aircraft. I'll have you both removed in handcuffs if I have to." Gasps rippled through the cabin. A man in row 3 shifted uncomfortably, finally speaking up. "Captain." Maybe he stopped himself when Kane's glare swept toward him. Margaret clasped her pearls with a satisfied sigh. Finally, someone taking charge. Jordan felt the weight of every eye pressing on him. He heard the whispers, the judgment. Why don't they just move? Why cause trouble inside? His thoughts collided. If we move, Aaliyah learns that standing your ground means nothing. If we don't, we risk everything: humiliation, headlines, maybe worse. Dad trusted me to protect her. What do I do? He looked at his sister. Her eyes, wide but steady, met his. She mouthed a single word, "No." And in that fragile moment, Jordan knew his father's lessons, his sister's courage, his own quiet strength all converged into clarity. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen, his father's number glowing back at him. The last line of defense. Captain Kane noticed. "Who are you calling? That won't help you now." But Jordan pressed the button anyway. The dial tone rang in his ear, loud as thunder. The cabin watched in tense silence. Margaret frowned, confused. Linda's eyes narrowed. Thomas crossed his arms, impatient. Then, on the third ring, a voice answered, deep, calm, commanding. "Jordan." "What's wrong?" Relief washed through Jordan, but he kept his tone steady. "Dad, we need you." The cabin felt heavier than ever. Jordan's thumb hovered over his phone screen as the seconds stretched into an eternity. He could hear the faint rustle of passengers shifting in their seats, the whisper of nervous murmurs. Aaliyah sat rigid beside him. Phone recording, hands clenched tightly around the device. The hum of the engines, normally comforting, now pressed against his chest like a drumbeat of impending conflict. Captain Douglas Kane leaned against the cockpit bulkhead, arms crossed, silver hair catching the cabin light. His eyes were fixed on Jordan and Aaliyah, sharp steel beneath a calm exterior. He had been through conflicts on flights before, but there was something in the teenager's steady, unwavering posture that unsettled him. He had expected fear, or at least hesitation, not defiance. Margaret Whitfield exhaled sharply, pressing a hand to her back again, theatrically wincing. Brandon glanced up from his phone for the first time, smirking with the sense of superiority only a privileged teenager could muster. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. Thomas Reed, the purser, took a deep breath, his hands on his hips. He tried again, speaking louder for everyone to hear. "This is simple. Move to row 5. No further argument. We need compliance for a takeoff." Jordan's chest tightened, but he held eye contact with Thomas. "We are not moving. Our seats were purchased legally. Our father bought them for us months ago. If there is an issue, it is not ours to fix," Aaliyah whispered, voice trembling slightly. "Jordan, do something. I don't want to be dragged off a plane." Jordan's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "I know. We'll be okay. I promise. Inside." Though, he wrestled with a storm of emotions, fear, anger, responsibility, and the dizzying knowledge that they were outnumbered and outpowered by authority and wealth. Captain Kane's jaw tightened. "This is not a request. I am giving a direct order. Vacate your seats immediately, or you will be removed forcibly. Security will be waiting at the gate. You will be banned from Sterling Airways for life. 60 seconds. Decide." The threat landed with the weight of inevitability. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, every passenger sensing the gravity of the ultimatum. Some looked at Jordan and Aaliyah with sympathy, others with impatience, others with quiet judgment. Jordan's mind raced. He remembered his father's voice from the driveway earlier that morning, steady and calm. "Sometimes the world will tell you that your presence isn't welcome. That doesn't mean you step back. Stand for what is right." But what was right? He was a 17-year-old boy facing a man who had spent decades mastering authority and intimidation. Aaliyah's wide, anxious eyes were fixed on him, her small hand gripping his. He couldn't fail her. He felt a flicker of anger ignite beneath his calm exterior. The injustice was blatant. They were not criminals. They were not troublemakers. They were being punished for their race, their youth, and the invisible assumption that they didn't belong in the seats their father had purchased. The 60-second countdown seemed both absurdly short and unbearably long. Each tick of the mental clock pressed down on Jordan like the weight of the cabin itself. Aaliyah's grip tightened, and he could feel her heartbeat racing, echoing his own. Then a thought emerged. Sharp and clear, there was one option they hadn't yet tried, one weapon the crew could not anticipate. He reached into his pocket, retrieving his phone, his thumb hovering over the contact labeled simply Dad. The name glowed on the screen, familiar and commanding. He felt a strange combination of fear and hope. This was no longer just about the seats. It was about dignity, about fairness, about ensuring his sister felt protected in a world that so often judged her before it understood her. Captain Kane noticed the movement. "Who are you calling?" he barked, stepping closer. "That won't help you now." Jordan ignored him, pressing the call. The dial tone rang once, twice, and then a deep, calm voice answered. Jordan. Everything okay? Relief coursed through him, but he held his voice steady, controlled. Dad, we need your help. The crew is trying to remove us from our seats. They're threatening to call security and ban us for life. The cabin fell into a tense silence. Margaret Whitfield frowned, confused, her carefully crafted confidence faltering. Brandon looked up from his phone, curiosity mingling with disbelief. Linda Hayes's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping into her once assertive demeanor. Thomas Reed frowned, impatience replaced with unease. Malcolm Price's voice, calm yet commanding, radiated authority through the phone. Put the senior crew member on the line. Jordan handed the phone over to Captain Kane, who took it reluctantly, his face tight with disbelief. This is Kane, he said, voice clipped. Malcolm Price's presence on the line was unmistakable, even without seeing him. The weight of decades of corporate negotiation, the subtle authority of a man used to having his decisions respected, pressed down on the cockpit. Captain Kane, Malcolm said evenly, I understand there is a situation involving my children. The cabin seemed to contract, every observer sensing the change. Linda Hayes's smugness vanished. Thomas Reed froze mid-step. Margaret's jaw dropped. Brandon blinked rapidly, caught between disbelief and awe. The implications were immediate and staggering. Horizon Global Logistics managed billions in contracts worldwide. Sterling Airways relied on them for its most lucrative corporate travel accounts. These were not ordinary teenagers. They were the children of a man whose influence could ripple across the airline industry with a single decision. Captain Kane's face went pale, his posture collapsing slightly as the weight of recognition dawned. The commanding presence that had seemed untouchable moments ago faltered. Aaliyah lowered her phone, exhaling quietly, as if releasing the tension she had been holding. Jordan watched the captain's expression crumble, feeling a complex mixture of relief and lingering unease. This was not just a victory, it was a demonstration of power, one that came with consequences he was only beginning to grasp. The silence stretched for several moments, each second loaded with potential eruption. Then Captain Kane spoke, voice subdued, almost trembling. Yes, Mr. Price, I understand. There has clearly been a misunderstanding. I will ensure it is resolved immediately. Jordan and Aaliyah exchanged a glance, a mixture of relief and disbelief. Their seats remained theirs, but the magnitude of what had just occurred weighed on them both. The battle was far from over, yet in this moment they had stood firm, unbowed. The phone in Captain Kane's hand felt heavier than any weight Jordan had ever imagined. Every eye in the VIP cabin was fixed on the exchange, the hum of the engines almost drowned out by the collective tension. Margaret Whitfield's fingers tightened around her pearl necklace. Brandon's smirk faltered, replaced with a flicker of uncertainty. Malcolm Price's voice cut through the cabin with calm authority. Captain Kane, I understand there is a situation involving my children's seating. I would like a full explanation immediately. The captain swallowed, voice strained as he replied, Mr. Price, I was not aware of the full situation, sir. There appears to have been a misunderstanding. We were simply following standard procedures to accommodate a platinum member. I assure you, sir, everything will be corrected. Jordan felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief because the immediate threat had shifted. Apprehension because he was beginning to see the power of perception. The world reacted quickly to names, titles, and assumed authority. A simple truth could be overshadowed by how people interpreted it. Linda Hayes glanced at Thomas Reed, both of them suddenly aware of the precarious position they were in. Their expressions, once confident, now betrayed panic. Every gesture, Every glance seemed amplified, exaggerated, under the scrutiny of a father who could reshape their careers with a single phone call. Margaret Whitfield's jaw dropped. Who is he?" she whispered sharply to Brandon, who finally put down his phone. He's the CEO of Horizon Global Logistics," Brandon murmured, his voice catching slightly. They handle billions in contracts for Sterling Airways." The cabin felt smaller, as if the air itself had thickened. Jordan leaned back slightly, the tension coiling in his chest slowly unspooling. The power they had feared moments ago had shifted, but it was the knowledge of that power that made him uneasy. This was not about them alone, it was about the network of influence and leverage that now hung over the crew. Captain Kane's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted the phone, his authoritative posture faltering. For decades, he had managed planes, passengers, and disputes with the certainty of a man in control. Now, he was confronted with a name he could not ignore. Malcolm Price was not just a father. He was a titan whose influence stretched into every corner of corporate travel. Thomas Reed's face went pale. "Sir," he began, voice tight. I did not realize," Malcolm interrupted softly, deliberately, with the precision of someone used to commanding boardrooms. "I expect this matter to be resolved immediately. Captain, my children are in the seats they were assigned. I trust you will act accordingly." The weight of the statement pressed down on everyone. The other passengers exchanged glances, some wide-eyed, others leaning back as though watching a drama unfold. The narrative had shifted in an instant. What had seemed like a confrontation between teenagers and authority had transformed into a matter of corporate oversight, with Jordan and Aaliyah at the center. Aaliyah lowered her phone, exhaling quietly, but she kept her hands poised to record if needed. Her eyes met Jordan's. The unspoken thought passed between them. We are still just kids, but the presence of their father changed everything. Margaret Whitfield's eyes narrowed. "This is absurd," she hissed, attempting to maintain composure. "You can't just..." Jordan, calm but resolute, spoke before the captain could intervene. "Mrs. Whitfield, these seats were purchased and confirmed. Any issue is with Sterling Airways, not us." Brandon muttered, voice barely audible. "I can't believe this." They actually called their dad. Linda Hayes and Thomas Reed exchanged panicked glances. Their confidence shattered. They had assumed compliance, that a polite threat from authority would suffice to force the teens from their seats. Now, every action they had taken was under scrutiny, and the very foundations of their decision-making were collapsing. Captain Kane, attempting to regain some semblance of control, adjusted his stance. His voice was subdued, almost conciliatory. "Yes, Mr. Price, I understand. I apologize for the misunderstanding. It will be corrected immediately." The cabin exhaled collectively. Some passengers leaned back, others whispered quietly, but the sense of finality had shifted. Jordan felt a mix of relief, vindication, and unease. The battle had not been about seats alone. It had been about the subtle ways power, race, and authority intersected. Aaliyah finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "They're going to fix it." Jordan nodded. "They have no choice." Margaret Whitfield, now escorted reluctantly to the rear of the business-class cabin by another flight attendant, muttered under her breath, her carefully constructed confidence crumbling. Brandon followed silently, his earlier arrogance replaced with cautious awareness. Linda Hayes approached Aaliyah, hands slightly shaking, offering a nervous smile. "Miss Price, Mr. Price, I apologize. This should not have happened." Jordan gave a small nod. "Thank you. We just want to fly safely, like everyone else." The captain retreated toward the cockpit, his posture defeated. The weight of Malcolm Price's name and influence had shifted the entire balance. What had started as a moment of fear for the two teens had become a demonstration of how authority could be held accountable, and how quickly power could invert when confronted with truth and connection. Jordan and Aaliyah settled back into their seats. The cabin lights reflected softly off the polished pods, the glow highlighting the calm determination on their faces. They had won the battle without confrontation, but the victory was tempered by a complex awareness the world was still a place of assumptions and prejudice, even when the truth was clear. The siblings exchanged a quiet look, relief mingled with reflection. The lesson was clear courage, combined with knowledge and the right support, could alter outcomes. But the deeper understanding that fairness often required intervention from those with both power and conscience settled quietly in Jordan's chest. For Aaliyah, the lesson was visceral. The camera in her hands captured more than just seats or confrontation. It captured resilience, the assertion of dignity, and the subtle mechanics of influence. She realized the importance of documenting, of having proof when authority misapplied its power. Jordan, gazing out the small oval window, felt a heavy awareness settle on his shoulders. This was a victory. Yes, but it was also a stark demonstration of the systemic realities of the world they navigated: race, privilege, authority. They all collided in moments like these, shaping outcomes in ways beyond individual control. And yet, for the first time that day, Jordan allowed himself a small, quiet smile. He had protected his sister. They had maintained their dignity. And for now, that was enough. The cabin settled into an uneasy calm. Jordan Price leaned back in 1A, the soft leather of the pod now a strange mixture of comfort and tension. Aaliyah adjusted her phone in her hand, still recording, though her hands no longer shook. The adrenaline had faded slightly, replaced by a heavy awareness of what had just occurred. Linda Hayes hovered nearby, offering what she thought was a conciliatory smile, though her eyes betrayed anxiety. "Mr. Price, Miss Price, I am truly sorry for what happened," she said, voice soft, almost pleading. "It should not have come to this." Jordan nodded politely but kept his distance. He understood the power dynamics at play. These weren't simple apologies, they were acknowledgments of error under the shadow of Malcolm Price's influence. The flight attendant's actions were not excused, but neither was the way the world interpreted power. Aaliyah finally lowered her phone completely and exhaled slowly. "It's over," she whispered, though her voice carried both relief and the faint tremor of lingering tension. Jordan's eyes scanned the cabin. The Whitfields had been escorted to the rear of the business-class cabin, their faces tight with fury and disbelief. Brandon glanced once at Jordan and Aaliyah, a mixture of frustration and reluctant respect passing across his features, though it was quickly replaced by scowls. Captain Kane had retreated toward the cockpit, his authoritative posture replaced by a subtle slump, shoulders tight with tension. Thomas Reed remained near the galley, occasionally glancing toward the front, as though expecting Malcolm Price to appear at any moment to enforce consequences. Jordan turned to Aaliyah. "Let's just sit tight. They've been told the seats are yours. That's all we can do for now." Aaliyah nodded, but the vibrant spark she usually carried was tempered by exhaustion. She had spent so long recording every moment, every expression, every tone, that her voice felt muted. The cabin's soft lighting and the quiet hum of the engines now seemed almost suffocating, the weight of the confrontation still pressing against her chest. Minutes passed slowly. Flight attendants moved with cautious precision, offering glasses of water or gestures of assistance. Every action seemed overcompensated, carefully measured to demonstrate submission without acknowledging the wrong directly. The siblings observed silently, aware that the calm was temporary, fragile, a thin veneer over tension that could erupt again at any moment. Jordan's thoughts drifted inward. He reflected on the sheer speed at which events had shifted. What had started as a minor seating dispute had escalated into a confrontation that drew in the captain, the purser, and finally, his father. The realization that the name of Malcolm Price had the power to reorder authority was both comforting and disturbing. It was a lesson about leverage, but also about the fragility of social perception. Aaliyah broke the silence, her voice low and thoughtful. "Do you think, if Dad wasn't who he is, it would have ended the same way?" Jordan's jaw tightened. "No. That's why we have to be careful. Courage is important, but so is understanding the stakes. Right now, we're lucky, but the world doesn't always reward fairness." The siblings exchanged a look of mutual understanding, an unspoken pact forming between them. They had faced authority, fear, and prejudice, and had emerged intact. But the lesson was clear: strength without strategy could be dangerous, even fatal in its consequences. Aaliyah's eyes drifted toward her phone again. She watched the video she had captured the entirety of the confrontation, the tension, the moments of injustice, and finally the turning point when her father's name shifted the balance of power. Her fingers hovered over the screen, contemplating whether to share it immediately or wait. Jordan leaned back, eyes half closed. He considered the implications of public exposure. The video could vindicate them, yes, but it could also spark backlash, misinformation, or worse, unintended consequences for those who had acted even poorly. Under pressure, the ethical weight of recording and potentially broadcasting the event pressed on him. For Aaliyah, the video was more than evidence. It was a shield, a record of truth, in a world where authority could misinterpret, distort, or conceal. And yet, she felt the tension of knowing that even a truthful record could be weaponized, spun, or used to inflame. Flight attendants continued to hover, offering champagne, water, and apologies. Every gesture was layered with fear, as if anticipating consequences that might not yet have arrived. Jordan and Aaliyah recognized the subtle shift the power dynamics had inverted. Those who had wielded authority recklessly were now unsure, their confidence fractured. Jordan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the day pressing against him. He thought of his father, Malcolm Price, and the careful, measured authority he had exerted through a simple phone call. It was a reminder that power was not only in action, but in perception. Aaliyah adjusted her seat slightly, leaning back, and whispered, "We did it, but it doesn't feel simple." Jordan nodded. "No, it doesn't. But we stood up. That counts. That matters." The flight continued its slow taxi to the runway. The cabin lights reflected softly off polished surfaces, highlighting the siblings' composed faces, masks of calm over a storm of thought and reflection. Around them, the airline crew moved cautiously, aware that their authority had been challenged in a way that could ripple far beyond a single flight. Jordan and Aaliyah had won the immediate battle, but both understood the truth: the larger world was complex, and fairness was never guaranteed. The lesson was clear, the experience indelible. They had seen the speed and precision of corporate power, witnessed the fragility of authority when confronted with truth and influence, and learned the value of documenting injustice. As they prepared for takeoff, a quiet sense of reflection settled between them. They were safe, their dignity intact, their seats secured. Yet, the emotional weight of the confrontation lingered, an awareness that courage alone was not always enough. It must be paired with foresight, preparation, and, occasionally, the right support. Jordan reached across, taking Aaliyah's hand for a moment. "We're okay. he whispered. "This is just one step. We'll be ready for the next." Aaliyah squeezed back, a small, tentative smile forming. The hum of the engines grew louder, the vibration beneath their seats a reminder of the journey ahead, both literally and metaphorically. The storm had passed, but the lessons, the reflections, and the awareness of the world's complexity would travel with them far beyond the confines of Sterling Airways Flight 472. By the time Sterling Airways Flight 472 leveled off at cruising altitude, the immediate tension in the VIP cabin had eased. But Jordan Price could feel the storm of consequences forming just beneath the surface. Aaliyah sat quietly beside him, scrolling through her recorded footage, replaying the confrontation again and again. She wasn't just watching, it was a methodical examination of every word, every glance, every micro-expression that had unfolded in the past hour. Jordan leaned back, hands folded across his chest. He could feel the adrenaline fading, replaced with a lingering mix of exhaustion and reflection. The cabin lights cast a soft glow, highlighting the polished wood and creamy leather of the pods around them. It looked serene, almost peaceful, but the reality behind it was far more complex. They had been right, yet rightness alone did not guarantee security. The world had a way of twisting perception, and power, both corporate and social, could alter narratives instantly. Aaliyah finally looked up. "Do you think everyone sees it the way we do?" Jordan shook his head slowly. "No, some people see it differently. Some will only see two kids who made trouble. Others will see authority overstepped. It's complicated." She exhaled sharply. "I hate that it's complicated. I just wanted to capture the truth." Jordan glanced at her, offering a small, reassuring smile. "And you did, but truth alone isn't enough. People interpret things through what they want to see, and sometimes it's about who holds the power to make the story stick." Aaliyah's thumb hovered over the share button on her phone. She wanted to post the video immediately, let the world see the confrontation and the vindication, but Jordan placed a hand lightly on hers. "Not yet. We need to think about the consequences. This isn't just about us anymore, it's bigger than our feelings. Posting now could escalate things in ways we can't control." They sat in silence for a few moments, the engines humming steadily beneath them. Outside, the clouds stretched endlessly across the horizon, white and serene against a soft blue sky. Inside, however, their minds were racing. Jordan reflected on the crew, the captain, the purser, Linda Hayes. He didn't wish harm upon them personally, but he understood the reality their actions had crossed lines, and accountability was inevitable. He could feel the moral weight pressing down on him. They had been threatened unjustly, and in another world, without their father's influence, the outcome could have been devastating. Aaliyah's voice cut softly through his thoughts. "Do you think Dad knows exactly what to do?" Jordan nodded. "He does. He always does. But it's more than just fixing this situation. He's thinking about the consequences, the ripple effects, what comes next. That's why he's careful, deliberate. That's why we're still here in our seats." Hours passed as the flight progressed. The crew moved cautiously, avoiding unnecessary interactions with the Price siblings. Even the Whitfields, seated farther back, maintained a tense silence, their earlier arrogance replaced with simmering resentment. Every gesture in the cabin seemed amplified, weighted by the knowledge of oversight from an unseen but omnipresent authority, the father whose name had altered the course of the confrontation. Jordan observed the passengers around them. Some whispered quietly, their expressions a mix of sympathy and judgment. Others kept their distance, clearly aware of the tension and the significance of the confrontation. He realized the incident had transformed him and Aaliyah from ordinary teenagers into symbols, whether they wanted it or not. The thought settled heavily in his chest. Power, privilege, and race intersected in ways that could distort the narrative, even when truth was on their side. The immediate crisis had been resolved, but the broader implications loomed large. Aaliyah, noticing his reflective mood, reached over and nudged him lightly. "You okay, Jordan?" exhaled slowly. "I will be, but we have to be ready. Once the video goes public, or once the crew reports back, things will start moving beyond this cabin. Decisions will be made. Careers will be affected. Headlines will spin the story in ways we can't control. That's just reality." Aaliyah's eyes widened. "Do you think people will understand the truth?" Jordan considered it. "Some will, but it won't matter to everyone. The world doesn't always reward fairness. Sometimes it only notices who has the power to shape perception." Silence returned between them, heavy and contemplative. Outside the cabin, clouds drifted lazily, but inside, the siblings were acutely aware of the storm that had passed and the one that was forming on the horizon. Aaliyah finally spoke, voice soft but firm. "Even if the world doesn't understand, at least we know the truth, and at least we stood up for ourselves." Jordan nodded. "Exactly. That's what matters most. Standing up, knowing we acted rightly, protecting each other. The rest, we handle as it comes." The remainder of the flight passed with a quiet intensity. Flight attendants offered service with caution, their movements careful, almost apologetic. The Whitfields remained sullen, their earlier confidence shattered but unspoken. Jordan and Aaliyah remained seated, poised, observing but not engaging further. By the time the aircraft began its descent into Los Angeles International Airport, the siblings were mentally prepared for the next stage. The confrontation had been resolved in the cabin, but they knew the story would continue to unfold beyond it in news reports, social media, and corporate conversations. Their role was now to navigate the aftermath with the same calm, analytical approach that had guided them through the immediate threat. Aaliyah turned to Jordan one last time before the final approach. "Whatever happens next, we handle it together." Jordan smiled faintly, squeezing her hand. "Together. Always." The plane touched down smoothly, the tires kissing the runway with a soft screech. Outside, the sprawling city of Los Angeles stretched beneath them, a patchwork of roads, buildings, and opportunity. The siblings glanced at one another, understanding that the journey was far from over, but confident in their ability to face whatever came next, side by side. The wheels of Sterling Airways Flight 472 rolled onto the tarmac of Los Angeles International Airport with a quiet screech, a sound that signaled both relief and anticipation. Jordan Price and Aaliyah sat in their VIP pods, glancing around the cabin with a mix of wariness and quiet satisfaction. Their immediate ordeal was over, but they both sensed the ripple of consequences that awaited outside the aircraft doors. As the cabin crew prepared for disembarkation, Captain Douglas Kane's face was pale, tension etched into the lines around his eyes. Thomas Reed hovered nearby, a hand gripping the galley counter, his confidence long gone. Linda Hayes moved cautiously, glancing at the siblings as if expecting them to erupt at any moment. The dynamic had shifted completely. Authority, once unquestionable, was now tempered by fear and the recognition of power beyond their control. Jordan felt the familiar hum of adrenaline fade, replaced by reflection. The confrontation had been intense, but it was also a lesson in perception, privilege, and the subtle ways authority could be manipulated. Aaliyah's phone rested on her lap, still recording, a silent witness to the event. The weight of its presence reminded them that documentation could be as powerful as action, sometimes more so. "Are we really going to just walk off like nothing happened?" Aaliyah whispered, adjusting her phone. Jordan shook his head. No, we need to be mindful. The world outside this plane is different. We have to navigate it carefully. Standing up inside the cabin is one thing. The story that reaches outside, that's another battle. Margaret, Whitfield, and Brandon had been quietly escorted to the rear, their previous confidence replaced with a mix of frustration and disbelief. They whispered among themselves, eyes darting toward the front of the cabin, occasionally glancing at the Price siblings. The imbalance of power was clear. The Whitfields' entitlement had been confronted, and the realization of authority's fragility was palpable. Captain Kane approached the front of the cabin, clearing his throat. "Passengers, please remain seated until the jetway is connected. We will disembark in an orderly fashion." His tone was professional, but the subtle quiver betrayed his inner stress. He understood that every move he made was now being evaluated, not just by the passengers, but by corporate eyes, by social perception, by the reach of Malcolm Price's influence. Jordan and Aaliyah exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken truth the plane might be grounded. But the repercussions of this incident were just beginning. Aaliyah's hands fidgeted with her phone. She wanted to post the video immediately, to share the story as they experienced it, but Jordan gently placed his hand over hers. "Not yet," he said softly. "We wait. Dad will guide us." As the cabin door opened and the jetway connected, the siblings prepared themselves for the inevitable exposure. Reporters, security personnel, and airline executives could be anywhere, and the moment the door swung open, the private confrontation would enter the public sphere. Once on the tarmac, the siblings were met by two sharply dressed figures from Sterling Airways executive team. Genevieve Croft, Vice President of Customer Experience for North American Operations, extended a professional but empathetic smile. "Jordan, Aaliyah, I am truly sorry for what you experienced. We will ensure you are escorted safely and that the issue is addressed at the highest level." Aaliyah's hands tightened around Jordan's. He nodded subtly, offering reassurance. They were about to leave the cabin, but the journey was far from over. The confrontation had shifted from a private struggle to a public reckoning, and both siblings understood that their father's intervention had set a new stage. Captain Kane approached, his demeanor subdued. He extended a hand toward Jordan. "Mr. Price? Miss Price? I apologize for the handling of your seating. It was inappropriate, and I assure you that corrective measures will follow." Jordan accepted the handshake politely, but without warmth. "Thank you, Captain. I hope the airline learns from this." Linda Hayes approached cautiously, eyes glistening. "Please, tell your father I am sorry. I never meant for it to escalate this way." Jordan nodded, acknowledging her apology, and then turned to Genevieve Croft. "Lead the way. We just want to get to our father." The siblings were guided through a secure channel, bypassing standard customs and immigration procedures. The efficiency and precision of the escort reflected the gravity of Malcolm Price's influence. A sleek black Mercedes waited on the tarmac, its dark windows hiding the figure inside. As the vehicle approached, Jordan's pulse quickened. Malcolm Price stepped out, his presence commanding but tempered by worry. His eyes softened as he approached his children, taking them into a long, protective embrace. "Are you both okay?" he asked, voice low and measured. "We're fine, Dad," Jordan said, his tone calm but filled with the lingering intensity of the morning's events. Aaliyah's hands rested lightly on his shoulders. "I got it all on video," she said quietly, a mixture of relief and lingering tension in her voice. Malcolm nodded slowly, his gaze moving toward the departing plane. "Good," he said, voice edged with quiet fire. because this isn't over. This is just the beginning. He explained to them, as they drove through the early Los Angeles morning, that he had already contacted Sterling Airways CEO Harrison Shaw and outlined specific expectations, a formal apology, immediate corrective action, and full accountability for the employees involved. The scale of intervention was massive, a demonstration not just of paternal protection, but of strategic corporate leverage. Jordan and Aaliyah listened, absorbing the nuances of power, influence, and responsibility. It was one thing to stand up for oneself in the moment. It was another to navigate the aftershocks in a world where perception could amplify or distort reality. Their father's guidance provided a framework, but it also carried the weight of moral complexity. Aaliyah's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. So, people are going to see this differently. Right. Not everyone will understand what happened. Malcolm nodded. Yes, some will see the wrongdoing, some will see privilege. But our goal is to ensure the truth is known and that corrective action is taken. That is all we can control. The siblings absorbed the lesson in silence, understanding that the power of narrative was as critical as the actions themselves. The confrontation on Flight 472 had become more than just a personal victory. It was a test of ethics, influence, and societal perception. As the Mercedes drove toward their hotel, the siblings reflected on the morning's events. The immediate threat had passed, their dignity preserved, but the broader battle for perception, accountability, and justice had only just begun. They had learned that courage, documentation, and strategic action could shape outcomes, but that the path forward required careful consideration of consequences and the ripple effects of power. Aaliyah finally spoke, her voice quiet but resolute. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Jordan nodded, his eyes focused on the city lights stretching across Los Angeles. Together, he agreed. The lesson was clear strength. Courage and integrity were the true measures of power, far beyond titles, seats, or momentary authority. By the time Jordan and Aaliyah were settled in their hotel suite overlooking downtown Los Angeles, the digital storm had already begun. News outlets had picked up fragments of the incident. Social media feeds were ablaze, and hashtags related to Flight 472 were trending worldwide. Aaliyah sat cross-legged on the couch, phone in hand, watching the chaos unfold. Clips of her recording, carefully edited by others, had gone viral. The narrative was shifting rapidly, not entirely in their favor. Some users hailed them as heroes standing up to injustice. Others painted the siblings as entitled teens using their father's influence to bully airline staff. Jordan leaned back in his chair, absorbing the headlines. He had anticipated some backlash, but the speed and intensity were staggering. The cabin confrontation had been private. The video was personal documentation. Now it had become public property, subject to the biases, assumptions, and interpretations of millions. Malcolm Price entered the room, calm but visibly concerned. He placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. I know it's overwhelming, but we'll handle this strategically. This is about more than our family. It's about fairness, accountability, and making sure the narrative reflects the truth. Aaliyah glanced up at him, eyes wide. Dad, they're calling us bullies. People are saying we ruined 3 employees' lives. Malcolm nodded slowly. Some will see it that way. It's a side effect of power. People fear it, they resent it, and they project their anger. But that doesn't make the facts any less true. The crew acted improperly. You two acted responsibly, recording what happened. That is what matters, Jordan interjected, voice steady despite the tension. But how do we fix the perception? The video can be twisted. The story can be told any way someone wants. Malcolm sat down beside them. That's exactly why we need transparency. We will release the full, unedited footage from Aaliyah's phone. Every microaggression, every dismissal, every unjust threat, complete context. People won't be able to misinterpret what really happened. Aaliyah's fingers hovered over her phone. The decision weighed on her. Releasing the video meant confronting the world, opening themselves up to scrutiny and criticism. But it was also the only way to reclaim the narrative, to assert their truth against misinformation. Jordan leaned forward. If we release it, it has to be done carefully. We don't want it to look like bragging or revenge. It has to be factual, calm, and undeniable. Malcolm nodded. Exactly. This is not about humiliation. It's about accountability. It's about showing the consequences of actions when authority is abused. And it's about turning that awareness into something constructive. Within hours, the Price family worked with Julian Vance Roberts, Malcolm's longtime communication strategist, to prepare the release. The plan was meticulous, the full unedited video, accompanied by a brief statement from Malcolm emphasizing the importance of integrity, accountability, and justice. There would be no edits, no commentary, only the raw events captured during the flight. Meanwhile, Sterling Airways executives scrambled. Harrison Shaw, the CEO, had already received a call from Malcolm outlining expectations, immediate formal apologies, corrective action for the employees involved, and a review of training and procedures. The weight of corporate power had shifted rapidly, and the airline's public relations team scrambled to contain potential fallout. Back in the suite, Aaliyah finally pressed send, her heart hammering in her chest. The video uploaded live across social media platforms, news outlets, and streaming feeds. Within minutes, it began to spread like wildfire. Reactions came fast. Some users praised the siblings for standing up against unjust treatment. Others debated the ethics of using parental influence to enforce justice. A few sought to discredit the Price family entirely. Jordan watched quietly, absorbing each notification, each comment, each share. He felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The immediate threat in the cabin had passed, but now the battlefield was digital, public, and far-reaching. He realized that courage in private was one thing. Courage in the public eye required an entirely different kind of strength. Aaliyah turned to him, voice trembling slightly. It's huge. People are talking about it everywhere. Jordan nodded. Yes. And it's a reminder that the truth doesn't always speak for itself. People interpret, filter, and project their own biases. That's why transparency matters. And that's why we document. Malcolm joined them, placing a reassuring hand on Aaliyah's shoulder. This is also a teaching moment for you and for the world. Authority carries responsibility, and power must be wielded with care. You two exemplified integrity under pressure. That is the lesson others can learn from. Across social media, hashtags like #Flight472, Justice for the Price siblings, and Sterling Airways began trending. News anchors debated the incident, legal analysts speculated on the liability of the airline, and commentators discussed the broader implications of race, privilege, and corporate accountability. Jordan and Aaliyah sat quietly, watching as the world absorbed the events of the past 24 hours. They were no longer just teenagers on a plane. They were symbols in a much larger conversation about fairness, power, and responsibility. The immediate victory had been their preservation of dignity and rightful seating, but the broader victory was in shaping awareness and promoting accountability. Aaliyah finally spoke, her voice soft but determined. Even if people misunderstand parts of it, at least the truth is out there. And maybe it will make a difference for someone else. Someday. Jordan nodded. squeezing her hand gently. Exactly. That's why we did this. Not for revenge, not for attention, but for fairness, for accountability, and for every person who doesn't have the chance to stand up like we did. Malcolm observed his children, pride tempered by the weight of responsibility. "You've done well," he said. "This is a lesson that will stay with you forever. The world can be harsh, unjust, and quick to judge, but courage, documentation, and integrity are tools that can make a difference, even in the most complicated situations." The siblings exchanged a quiet glance, understanding the truth in their father's words. The flight, the confrontation, and now the public reaction had transformed them. They had witnessed the speed at which authority could falter under scrutiny, the fragility of perception, and the importance of standing firm in the face of injustice. Outside their hotel window, the city stretched endlessly, lights twinkling like stars brought to earth. Inside, Jordan and Aaliyah sat together, hands intertwined, hearts still racing, minds reflecting on the journey they had endured. They had faced fear, injustice, and intimidation, and emerged with dignity, lessons, and a deeper understanding of the complexities of power and truth. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Price family's suite, casting long shadows across the polished wood floors. Jordan and Aaliyah sat side by side on the couch, eyes glued to the screens before them. The video they had released the night before had exploded across every platform imaginable. News outlets, social media feeds, and trending channels were flooded with the footage of Flight 472. Aaliyah's fingers hovered over the comments, her face a mixture of awe and apprehension. Some users celebrated them as symbols of courage, fairness, and accountability. Others criticized them, accusing the siblings of using their father's influence to punish the airline staff unfairly. The narrative had split in the digital realm, shaping public perception in ways both empowering and terrifying. Jordan leaned back, exhaling slowly. "It's out there now," he said, voice low. "Everyone will interpret it through their own lens. But at least the unedited truth is available. Nobody can manipulate that." Malcolm Price entered the room, cup of black coffee in hand, moving with the calm, commanding presence that had always defined him. "You both handled yesterday exceptionally well," he said, voice firm yet gentle. "But now we face a new challenge shaping how this story is understood by the wider public. Facts alone won't always carry the weight they need without context." Aaliyah's eyes searched her father's. "So, what do we do next?" Malcolm settled into the armchair across from them, thoughtful. "We reclaim the narrative. We engage directly, honestly, and openly. This isn't about attacks or retaliation. It's about presenting the full context, emphasizing accountability, and demonstrating that integrity matters, even when wielded with power." Jordan nodded. "We do it carefully. No exaggeration, no dramatization, just facts. And our perspective." Malcolm smiled faintly. "Exactly. The world responds to authenticity. When people see calculated honesty, they recognize it, they respond to it, and they remember it." Julian Vance Roberts, the family's communication strategist, entered with a laptop, a calm urgency in his demeanor. "We've coordinated a live-streamed interview with Brenda Carlisle, one of the leading journalists covering corporate accountability. This is your chance to present your side of the story without intermediaries. It's unfiltered, unedited, and global." Aaliyah's eyes widened. "Live, that's intense." Jordan took a deep breath. "It's the only way. If we don't speak directly, people will continue to twist what happened. We can control the facts if we present them ourselves." Malcolm placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "And you won't be alone. I'll be there, guiding and supporting you. But remember, this is your voice, your experience. It's about truth, not theatrics. Hours later, in a stark modern studio, Jordan and Aaliyah faced Brenda Carlisle across a polished black table. The camera's red light glowed steadily, the hum of the broadcast equipment a quiet reminder of the global audience watching. Brenda's gaze was sharp, intelligent, and probing. "Mr. Price, Miss Price," she began, "the prevailing narrative suggests you used your father's wealth and influence to punish airline employees over a seating dispute. Millions have watched your video. How do you respond to the claims that this was an abuse of power?" Jordan inhaled slowly, keeping his tone calm and measured. "From the moment we were confronted, we acted to protect ourselves. We were in the right seats, and we were threatened with removal and arrest for no legitimate reason. Our father's involvement was about ensuring our safety and holding accountable those who acted improperly. It wasn't about punishment, it was about fairness." Aaliyah leaned slightly forward, her voice steady despite the intensity of the moment. "I recorded everything because we were scared. Not for clout, not for revenge. We wanted a record in case the situation escalated, which it did. The video you've seen is the truth of what happened." Brenda's eyes narrowed slightly. "Many critics argue that this still looks like an exercise of privilege. How do you address that perception?" Malcolm Price spoke softly, deliberately. "Privilege without accountability is dangerous, but accountability exercised with integrity is necessary. My children were threatened unjustly. My intervention was measured, focused on truth and protection. We are now using this moment to advocate for broader awareness and change," Jordan added. "The broader issue here isn't just about us. It's about the subtle discrimination and abuse of authority that can happen anywhere, especially to those without the resources to defend themselves. We want to use our experience to help others, not to make headlines for ourselves." Aaliyah nodded. "That's why we're establishing the Price Justice Foundation. Its mission will be to support people facing discrimination in travel, housing, and employment, legal aid, advocacy, and awareness. This is bigger than our seats. It's about systemic fairness." The interview continued, highlighting both the immediate confrontation and the broader societal implications. Every question Brenda asked was met with honesty, clarity, and composure. The siblings' demeanor, grounded in calm confidence and integrity, resonated with viewers globally. Back in the hotel suite, the siblings and their father watched the live feed. Comments streamed in real time. Many users expressed support and admiration, sharing their own experiences of unfair treatment and thanking the Price family for highlighting these issues. Others remained skeptical, but the foundation of truth, the unedited footage, the detailed narrative, and the direct testimony provided a robust defense against misrepresentation. Aaliyah exhaled, a small smile forming. "It's working." "People are listening," Jordan nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. "Yes, but we have to remain engaged. Truth is powerful, but it requires persistence." Malcolm Price looked at his children with pride, tempered by seriousness. "You've handled yourself with integrity. This is more than just a viral moment. It's an opportunity to educate, advocate, and create real impact. That's the measure of courage, using it responsibly to make a difference." As the live interview concluded, the Price siblings felt a sense of accomplishment and reflection. The confrontation on Sterling Airways Flight 472 had evolved from a personal struggle to a global conversation about fairness, authority, and justice. They had faced fear, intimidation, and misrepresentation, and emerged not only with their dignity intact, but with a platform to advocate for systemic change. Jordan turned to Aaliyah, voice quiet but resolute. "We did it. We stood firm. And now we can help others stand firm too." Aaliyah smiled, a glimmer of the old fire returning. Yes, and this time, the world sees the truth. The evening settled over Los Angeles like a quiet blanket, the city lights twinkling below the hotel suite. Jordan and Aaliyah sat near the window, the glow from their devices casting soft shadows across their faces. The chaos of social media, news reports, and public reaction had calmed into a steady stream of conversations, discussions, and debates. Jordan's fingers drummed lightly against the armrest as he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The confrontation on Flight 472, the threats, the intimidation, and the ultimate intervention by their father, it had been a whirlwind, a collision of fear, power, and truth. Yet, now, in the stillness, the lessons became clear. Aaliyah spoke first, her voice quiet but firm. "It's strange. We were scared. We were angry. But now, it feels like we've learned something bigger than just about seats or a flight." Jordan nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's about courage, about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when the world is watching or ready to judge." Malcolm Price entered the room, closing the door softly behind him. He looked at his children with a mixture of pride and quiet contemplation. "What you two have done goes beyond the immediate confrontation," he said. "You've navigated fear, authority, and public perception. You've documented truth and acted with integrity. That's a rare combination, especially at your age." Aaliyah looked up, eyes wide. "But Dad, the backlash, the people saying we're entitled, it's overwhelming." Malcolm nodded, understanding the weight of public scrutiny. That is the nature of perception. When truth intersects with power, people will project their fears, biases, and assumptions. Some will misunderstand, some will misrepresent. That doesn't diminish your actions, it only highlights the importance of clarity and transparency. Jordan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "So, what do we do now? How do we make sure this doesn't just fade or get twisted?" Malcolm smiled faintly. "We keep the focus on what matters: accountability, fairness, and advocacy. The Price Justice Foundation is the next step. It channels attention and resources towards systemic change, helping those who do not have the advantage of influence, protection, or public support." Aaliyah's eyes brightened slightly. "So, it's not just about what happened on the flight, it's about using this moment to help others." Jordan nodded. "Exactly. We turn a personal experience into something larger, something that can make a difference beyond our own lives." Malcolm leaned back, his gaze moving to the sprawling city below. "And that is the essence of leadership and responsibility. Power is not simply about control, it's about accountability, empathy, and action that benefits more than just oneself." The siblings sat in contemplative silence, absorbing the gravity of the conversation. The lessons were subtle but profound, the interplay of courage, documentation, and strategic intervention, the fragility of authority under scrutiny, the importance of standing firm while maintaining integrity, and the responsibility that comes with power, whether inherited, earned, or exercised. Jordan finally spoke, voice soft but resolute. "I think I understand now. Standing up isn't just about defending yourself in the moment. It's about thinking ahead, about understanding consequences, about using what you have responsibly." Aaliyah nodded, her hands folded in her lap. "And documenting it, so that truth can't be erased or twisted. That's what saved us. That's what can help others." Malcolm placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "Exactly. You've learned firsthand that the world is complex. Fairness is not always immediate. And truth can be hard to assert, but courage, preparation, and integrity will always guide you. The siblings glanced at one another, a quiet understanding passing between them. Their shared experience had forged a bond, strengthened by adversity and reflection. They had faced authority, prejudice, and public scrutiny together and emerged with lessons that would resonate far beyond a single flight. Jordan's gaze shifted to Aaliyah's phone, still displaying the unedited footage. Even with all the backlash, the video shows the truth. That's what matters. People will eventually see it. Aaliyah smiled faintly. And we'll be ready when they do. We know what happened, and we know what we did. That's enough for me. Malcolm observed his children with a quiet sense of pride. And that, ultimately, is the point. External validation is fleeting. What matters is understanding your actions, learning from them, and using those lessons to guide future decisions. The room fell into a reflective silence, the glow of city lights and device screens illuminating the thoughtful faces of the Price family. In that moment, they recognized the enduring power of integrity, the necessity of courage, and the profound impact of standing firm in the face of injustice. As night deepened over Los Angeles, Jordan and Aaliyah prepared for rest, minds still racing but hearts steadied by reflection. The confrontation on Sterling Airways Flight 472 had been a pivotal moment, but its true significance lay in the lessons learned, the bonds strengthened, and the awareness that they could navigate an imperfect world with dignity and resilience. Malcolm Price looked on, quietly proud and contemplative. His children had faced adversity and emerged with clarity, courage, and insight. The experience would shape them, guide them, and influence their actions for years to come. It was a testament to the strength of character, the power of preparation, and the enduring importance of truth. Jordan finally whispered, voice almost to himself, "We're ready for whatever comes next." Aaliyah nodded, a faint smile returning. Together. This story of Jordan and Aaliyah Price goes beyond a single flight. It teaches a timeless lesson about courage, integrity, and the responsible use of power. Life often places us in situations where authority seems absolute and fairness feels out of reach. The siblings remind us that standing up for what is right requires calm, preparation, and sometimes the willingness to use the tools we have wisely. Even when the world misinterprets our actions, maintaining honesty and documenting the truth ensures that justice can eventually prevail. Importantly, the story highlights the responsibility that comes with privilege. Power should be used not to dominate, but to protect and uplift those who cannot defend themselves. For older viewers, this narrative resonates on multiple levels. It challenges us to reflect on how we respond to injustice in our own lives, whether at work, in social settings, or within family dynamics. It encourages a mindset of empathy, strategic thinking, and ethical leadership. The lesson is clear, true courage is not just acting boldly in a moment, but thinking ahead, taking responsibility, and ensuring our actions serve the greater good. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If this story resonated with you, please hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of courage, resilience, and justice. Your support helps us continue to bring real stories that matter.